For Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. We're looking back at Saturday's spring game for USC, and we're going to go to the defensive side of the ball here. And let's start right up front along that defensive line. Overall, a solid showing from a lot of guys. There were a few guys out, and obviously the news coming after spring ball that Brandon Peely tore his Achilles and underwent surgery, will be out for an extended time. So that's a hole in the middle. But Greg, your thoughts kind of on the defensive lines showing overall from the Saturday game?
Well, I thought the younger players really showed a lot of potential. The loss of Peely that's a senior. That's a guy that's a man, but that's a guy who also was inconsistent in his play, to be honest with you. And it's not exactly a state secret because Vic Soto was saying, if I get him really angry, he's a pretty good player. So we don't know how that would have turned out in the long run. He probably would have probably be given the first shot at starting. I think that was probably a logical production. But Tui Pelotu has taken what he looked like in as a freshman, and he's just a stud. He's quick, he's fast, he's tough, he's mean, he's everything you want at the collegiate level, and he's only a sophomore, and he's a leader type of player. So I'm going to slot him as a starter. I'm not even going to sit there and pretend like he needs to earn it more. He already showed what he could do last year. Apparently, that's not a problem for him. He comes to play, practice. Maybe he learned that from Marlon, his older brother. The question is who fills in the other spots, and it's really kind of too early to sit there and say I think we've got our lineup for going into training camp, because you mentioned a guy like Ishmael Shropshire, who everyone was kind of saying, a transfer from Alabama, there's a defensive lineman that's that big, you know, you would have to say if I had to bet money, he's going to be one of the starters, but we really don't know, which opens the door for people like Jay Toia, who has looked very good as a true freshman, large man, very large, and apparently he's catching on every practice, getting better. He had a fumble recovery in the showcase, so he's alert. And then you had Jamar Sakona, who is kind of quietly making his presence felt. And we have people that weren't available. Where was Tremblay? He's not in there. Either is Figueroa. So this was an opportunity Saturday to see some younger players do their thing. And I thought honestly that the younger players, along with Thule, did a pretty good job. I can tell you one thing: there was a lot more sacks that really weren't reported. And if you looked at had a chance to review the TV broadcast and go back over some of it, some of those quarterbacks might have been carried out with the help of a trainer to the sideline, which is you can take it that any way you want. But I thought they did a pretty good job.
Jay Toia is the guy for me. That again, another true freshman early enrollee that seems like there's one or two at every position, and they've all been so ready to go, and it's so impressive when you figure a lot of these guys are from California, and like we've talked about before, a lot of these guys didn't get their senior season to play, and so the fact that they've been able to kind of hit the ground running here has been again so impressive. Jay Toia, as soon as the pads came on, he had two practices where kind of watching him, without pads, it's like, okay, there's something there to work with. The second the pads came on for him, he has been just incredible. And you said because of the size, it's not one of those things where, okay, well, let's look, maybe 2-3 years down the road for a true freshman defensive tackle who needs to be in the middle of all this kind of chaos going on in there. He's been that good over the last few weeks, and again was a guy going into Saturday I thought, hey, keep an eye, and we'll see if he can kind of back that up in this setting. I thought he played really well. You mentioned Tui Pelotu. There's a handful of guys, where it's like, rest up. We'll see you for the season opener. He's one of those guys. One guy this spring when he's been in there, he hasn't been in there the whole time, but that I've been impressed by is Jake Lichtenstein, and he
Yes.
opted out last season, came back, maybe halfway through, and wasn't really ready to go. He's been good. He's been really good this spring, and I think he has a chance to be a real contributor for this defensive line again with Thule kind of saying, okay, this is my spot. Everybody else go go look to play somewhere else. But with him there and with Nick Figueroa coming back, you've got a really good start at the defensive end spots. But Jake Lichtenstein has played well enough, and he brings kind of that physical presence to him to think that he could be a real option to get on the field. And I was impressed by what he did. I think the defensive line has been good this spring. How good are they kind of when you start talking about a national level or even at the top of the Pac 12? That's what we'll find out in the fall, right? So at this point, you see a lot to work with and you see a lot of guys who can play some different spots and move around and maybe give opposing offenses some trouble. How good they are is something that we'll find out months from now. But I thought a real nice showing from that group up front.
You know, this is the reality of the situation is exactly what you said. We don't know how good they really are. The problem is when SC practices, they practice against the air raid. Okay, they don't see the smash mouth Notre Dame in your face. Obviously, they were, in my opinion, lucky they didn't have to play Alabama in the first game of the season, especially when Alabama was coming off a loss in a championship game and they had something to prove. Uh, so they're not going to see basically the physicality of the teams, even in Oregon. You took an Oregon or a Stanford, which we're going to see in the second game of the season. It's going to be like, we don't see this. It's almost like going to batting practice. You're going to face in a real game a 98-mile-an-hour pitcher, but you set the pitching machine at 88 miles an hour. How do you practice for 97, 98 miles an hour when your batting practice is 88 miles an hour? And I think that, to me, as someone who has coached, makes it very difficult to simulate that. Sometimes it takes a whole quarter or a whole half, and then in the second half, you might not be physically ready to continue that pace. So we can only go by what we see based on what is available to see. And it looks like these guys are really good players, but we really don't know until they face somebody who's going to be able to rush the football. I mean, even against Utah. I don't know why I didn't think of Utah, but Utah is another one that's going to bring it. So we'll see what happens, and certainly depth wise along the way.
Right. And one of the things I think we know about the defensive line already is that Vic Soto, he was a find coming over from Virginia. I've been very impressed kind of with what he's been able to do with recruiting and on the field and off the field with the players, just kind of how he relates to them, his presence there with those defensive linemen, with the defense in general, with the entire roster kind of overall too. I think he's been a great addition up front. And so when you talk about are you ready physically? If the defensive line takes on kind of the personality mentality of their position coach, I think that's a step in the right direction. And these guys have kind of it seemed like they've meshed the group and Soto at the coaching spot.
One of the things I think, and again, wishful thinking. There was, at the Saturday's event was Corey Foreman, and you say, we tend to forget that Corey Foreman is coming, and we get locked into what we're seeing right now, which we should, because that's all we can see. But when you add Corey Foreman to the mix, who knows what's going to happen? And I thought that Soto, really said it. We don't know. Even Orlando says it. These guys are going to come in with all these honors, but you're going to have to put on those pads because nobody cares about your honors. You're going to have to reestablish yourself because everybody, let's say at SC at some level, has a lot of honors. So, and Corey Foreman, I saw in an interview say, I know that I'm a marked man when I go there. Everybody's going to test me as the number one player in the country. and he seems to be well aware of it, which can only be a benefit to USC with that type of attitude.
Yeah, I mean, him coming in and being that good, and even if he is that, like you say, marked, a player like that can kind of raise the game of everybody else, where you know who's out there with you, and if any kind of extra attention goes that way, then that allows for other guys to do some things. So again, it's a huge roster out there for USC, and some positions are getting hit a little bit more with injuries than others, but so many early guys, you do forget a little bit about the guys who are coming in still over the summer. You got a couple cornerbacks and another really good linebacker, Rajon Davis, and obviously Corey Foreman is kind of the most well-known guy coming in for that defensive line. Going back to linebackers, and I think this was a position that's going to be really interesting to watch, especially that inside linebacker spot, because it's another spring without some of those names that when you look at the roster, you think, okay, those should be like the veteran guys coming back, Jordan Isefa and Solomon Tuliupupu, even, Taylor Katoa coming back from the mission, and he's not in there, but you had Raylan Goforth and Kanai Mago, who have kind of taken ownership of that inside linebacker spot. And I thought Stevie Nomura had a really solid game. His confidence level, I think, is skyrocketing this spring, being able to get on the field a little bit and get out there and run around. I thought he did well. And the inside linebacker spot was a position that Clay Helton mentioned after as being, in the immediate aftermath, saying, I feel like they did well, kind of, running lanes and filling gaps and doing all that stuff. And so that's a spot where you need to take a step forward. And there were, I think, some signs on Saturday there.
Well, I tell you what I liked. I like the physicality of the players inside. I one of the things I didn't agree with people that I talk with is this idea that Raylan Goforth isn't physical enough. I think he proved in this game he's definitely physical enough. Especially if a play is to the outside. Now, if it comes right at him, is we're going to find out about this new weight program they've had and how that's going to benefit. I'm not one that gets fired up about changing strength and conditioning people because we've heard it before and this is the best we've ever had and our players are in shape like they've never been before. So I don't care. I just want to see results. Just show me the results, and then I'll go along with the verbiage. But I think that one thing I thought was really kind of interesting was since we're talking about linebackers, just kind of moving outside just a little bit, was Drake Jackson. I thought that was the most dominating I've seen him play consistently. I mean, he was batting balls down. He was tracking guys from behind. I mean, he was just, if you're a quarterback, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. You know, People I thought got down on him last season, and I think it was justified in some ways. He was being put in a new position. There's no spring ball. He was learning, to drop back in space. And now, and I think even the coaching staff is learning about him. This is where we can really maybe maximize stuff. But boy, I tell you, number 99 was right there with them. And I just get this wonderful feeling of thinking, can you imagine he's on the same side as Corey Foreman in the future? And go, boy, you get two guys that are former high school teammates and best buddies. That's a lot of communication that can happen, and probably good communication at that.
Yeah, Drake had that one series where he gets into the backfield in Keaton Slovis's face and just, you know, Dikembe Mutombo's a ball back at him, just swats it down. Then he makes a tackle on the next play. Then he gets a sack on the next play. Series done, and he's off to the sideline. And that's what he can do. He's one of those guys where it's like, you've seen enough. Let's get ready for San Jose State. Go ahead, pack it up. Not that he would do that, but one of those guys where you know what you're getting and you're totally confident with him. I think staying on the outside with him, I think Hunter Echols has really raised his game this spring, and being able to kind of have those two guys on the field at the same time, or even kind of come in one after another. That gives you another option there, and another kind of pass rusher where you need them for this defense, to be able to kind of put pressure on the quarterback and be able to send a lot of different players from a lot of different angles. And I think that's what we've seen kind of from those players. But yeah, Drake, I mean, Drake was what he was on Saturday. If you're listing the guys where it's, okay, tick that box, we're good with that. He definitely kind of falls in there. So again, another, another kind of, we'll see about the linebackers, right? Does Drake take his game to that next level where you expect it to go after that freshman year, and then like you said, some adjustments there during that sophomore year, the second year, I guess. Where does he go this year, and then who steps up? Kind of can Raylan and can I really lock down that middle linebacker spot, that inside linebacker spot? Do they get pushed by some of those other guys? Raymond Scott is a guy who's kind of made some plays this spring. So it's USC, right? It's USC's roster. You got options everywhere. There's guys that can play. You got to find kind of the best ones and put them in the best spot.
And remember that this is Drake Jackson's NFL year. I hate to put it that way, but he knows this is his junior year. He knows that he can go to the league if he wants to give it a shot. So he's going to give it his best shot. I can guarantee you that. And so will the other people that are going to be in that same position. So in a way, that's a good thing.
Let's go back to the defensive backs, and we'll include all five of them, the three safeties and the two corners here. Three interceptions for that group. Dorian Hewitt kind of right off the bat goes downfield and makes an interception. He's a guy who had missed most of spring ball up until the last week or so. He comes in, gets an interception. Chris Steele makes a nice play for an interception, and Josh Jackson, a guy who has kind of done it since the beginning of spring ball there, now at corner. He grabs an interception too. So that was a continuation for me of what we've seen this spring, where the corners and safeties too, but in this game, the corners, they're not just kind of being in the right position. They're not just, knocking balls away. They're coming down with interceptions. And when you look at kind of Dante Williams, the cornerbacks coach, you think great recruiter. A lot of people, and Clay Hilton included, he always mentions, hey, this guy can coach. This guy is a good coach. And I think we're seeing steps forward from that cornerback position. But I'll open it up to you again. Safeties, corners, everybody included. What jumped out to you?
Well, obviously, Chris Steele looks like he's really mastering his trade. And I think one of the areas that I think that Dante Williams has done a really good job, and it's always a sign of a good coach, is people are always talking about, well, who's going to be opposite corner of Chris Steele? Who's going to take over Elijah Griffin spot? And he says, I don't look at it that way. I look at both spots, because if a guy isn't playing up to capability, they're both open. Positions are open. They're always open. And so, one of the guys, his name's always floated out there is Isaac Taylor Stewart, well, this appears to be the guy, that might slip in there. But I don't know. I feel confident that Steele is going to be one of the corners. That's just my opinion. I think if I was a betting man, I'd say that Taylor Stewart has maybe the inside track on it, maybe. But, the Pac-12 is a big passing league, and you better be able to defend, whether you're a cornerback or safeties or nickelback or what have you. So, it seems like every time you look, SC's getting a commitment from a defensive back, a wide receiver. But I can see in this case that, the players that are the young players that are actually here, and the transfer, Xavier Alfred, these players are all competing and they're all athletes. So, some of the interceptions, like I thought was a poor pass by Slovis, but also an excellent, high point interception, by the same token. So you have to say, did one of these defensive backs use their guile to set up an interception and give a false sense that they were beaten, when they were just kind of laying low and saying, go ahead, throw it. Oh, okay, here I am. And they break to the ball. And that can happen too. And of course, when they break down the film, the films don't lie. they're going to see that. But I thought the competition in the secondary was excellent. I enjoyed watching all of them play. They play with a great deal of flair. Uh, we have to always remember who they're guarding. I mean, if I'm the guy who's having to guard Drake Jackson, or Drake London, excuse me, I knew that was going to happen at some point. Uh, Drake London, he's going to make you look bad on some plays. He's just got size and jumping ability, and you're smaller, and he gets that advantage. It's like a big post player, posting you up. They're just going to lob it up. You can't stop it. He's just going to turn, catch it, and bank it in. But I thought that they were they were impressive athletes. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I'll hit the safety spot a little bit, and I've been really intrigued by this move with Max Williams going down and out for the season, and not having Greg Johnson there at that kind of nickel safety spot. Moving Isaiah Pola-Mao there and moving him up closer to the line of scrimmage and asking him to blitz a little bit more and help out in the run and kind of cover up there. Still, some man coverage from him where I think he's improved his game kind of in all those areas. He gives you a real sort of savvy veteran up there, and USC can't. Talanoa Hufanga is not on the roster anymore, and nobody like Talanoa Hufanga is on the roster in terms of what he can do physically, mentally, all of that. The idea that you're just gonna pick a guy off your bench and stick him in there and have him do everything that Hufanga did last year, you can't do it. So you got to find, I think, different ways to be able to fill what he did and what he was able to produce. Since Pola-Mao has gone over there, he's been able to do that. The timing of his blitzes is such that he is kind of catching everyone off guard. He had a sack on that on Saturday, and we've seen that a few times this spring from him. I think that's an interesting spot and becomes very interesting. Greg Johnson, should be back healthy and ready to go for the season. He's the returning starter there. What do you do if sort of Xavier Alford playing at safety, who stepped into kind of that starter position when Pola-Mao goes over to the other spot? If he's playing well, if Chase Williams is playing well, that's a tough decision. I think it's a decision any coach would love to make, right? I've got too many guys for too few spots. That's perfect. But he's a guy that I think is interesting. That whole kind of spot there, that again, calling it kind of that nickel safety. Britton Allen has played well there. He had a sack, and so you've got some production out of that spot. I think finding the right guy there is going to be interesting because I think you're okay with what Chase Williams has done so far at safety, and the coaches clearly they love the future of Xavier Alford. They, you don't go get a guy out of the transfer portal and bring him in if you don't think there's something there. But the three true freshmen that have come in, I don't know if you need them to play right away, but I feel really confident about the future of all three of those guys. Again, I don't know how many times we can talk about the true freshmen coming in and playing above what you expect from them, but Zamarian Gordon and Kalen Bullock and Anthony Beavers, I think they have been really good this spring. I thought they all flashed on Saturday too. Kalen Bullock gives you some versatility. He played a little corner. He's played safety. They've had actually all three of them at various points because of depth issues line up at corner and at safety. And so I think those guys again showed in this spring game, hey, there's a pretty bright future at that spot.
Well, I think they're going to have a number of options, but like anything else, you hope to find that these players can prove it on the practice field. But playing in the game is a whole different thing. And some guys who maybe don't look as good in practice and you're hesitant to play them, you put them in a game and the light turns on and they eat that up. They eat the pressure of it. They want the bright lights. They want it. Some guys who look so good in practice, you put them in there and they start shriveling like a prune once the bright lights. And, there's going to be people in the stands, and even for the veteran players to have people in the stands. I think Chris Steele mentioned that he was so excited that his family could come watch him play, and the whole team was excited. I mean, there didn't have to be 77,500 in the Coliseum, but they need to reacquaint themselves, even the veteran players, with fans. And by the time the season rolls around, there could be more fans allowed than there was, allowed for the spring game, and that's going to make a difference. That's going to make a difference. So, a 6-game season is a lot different than a 12-game season.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that there's going to be it'll be interesting to see what kind of took hold last year with not being accustomed to fans in there, and with the short season. Can you shake that off and get back to sort of what you've been used to, in all the years before that? And I think that's a big question that we'll get into in the fall. Let's hit a little special teams, and they didn't do any, during the spring game. There were no returns, no active returns or anything like that. But we got a chance to see some of the kickers, and Katie Nixon out there kind of fielding punts, which anytime you can go perfect catching Ben Griffith's punts, you've had a good day. I mean, that's not an easy kick to catch. Uh, but your thought on the two kickers, and the interesting thing being Parker Lewis not there, back home for an event. Should be back soon, but Alex Stadhouse kind of took over kickoffs and field goals there. But went 2 for 2. Ben Griffith's 4 punts, averaged about 48 yards a punt.
Well, I thought that for the most part, it was a good day for Alex Stadhouse. If you didn't know that he wasn't Parker Lewis, you'd say, "Oh, yeah, that's a good kicker." So I think the point would be that bottom line is that they're in good shape. Okay, they've got guys in case something did happen. And I tell you one thing we know about Sean Snyder: he isn't afraid to make a change. After all, Chase McGrath is now at Tennessee. And I thought Chase McGrath did a pretty good job. After all, I'm sure the University of Texas remembers him from the time they came into the Coliseum, which meant Todd Orlando and Craig Nybar. So they know what McGrath was able to do. And he sat there and decided, I'm going to go with the true freshman. And we all know that McGrath, he's a class kid. He said, I'm going to find someplace else, and he did. But I think punting wise, I'm not real concerned. I mean, one averaged 38 yards a kick. It's really about what is the return, what is the hang time. uh I don't have any doubt that Ben Griffith's going to be the guy. I mean, he's almost as old as the coaching staff. uh so some people were disappointed that they didn't return punts or kickoffs. I wasn't one of them. I figured it's not really necessary. Uh, so just enjoy the moment. I mean, Stadhouse did kick field goals with the TV cameras on, and attention placed to him, and I'm sure he wanted to do well because he figures, okay, Parker's not here. I gotta at least show that I'm capable, and he did. I think one of them was 47, 48 yards, and good for him.
I think the step forward that we saw kind of from USC special teams overall last season, I think if there's one spot, maybe it's punt returns for them, but the huge jump in coverage and just kind of consistency and all of that. Excited to see what Sean Snyder has in store for 2021. I think he's a very good special teams coach. So again, no concerns there. I thought seeing Ben Griffiths, hit the one for over 50 and average about 48. That's just fine. Well, we'll throw him out there and have confidence there. So again, a solid, day for special teams, even though there weren't the returns or anything like that, which you understand. I mean, it's a full contact scrimmage. That's another heap of plays where you're putting some of your, best skill guys in danger of getting hurt there for something where you're not. I don't think you're going to learn a whole lot about that spot there when you go through so much of that just during regular practices, walking through special teams and all that. So again, for our look at kind of the defensive side and for special teams, that there were a lot of guys that we expected to do well and did do well, but a few guys that popped up there too in what was just like, when we talked about the offense overall, you walk out of there saying, okay, enjoyed what I saw, and then let's build on that the rest of spring and into fall. So Again, for our look at the defensive side of the ball for the USC spring game, for Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. Thanks for watching We Are SC.